Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 103 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. Joe Meade is with me, too. And tonight we are previewing week 3 in the Big Ten. Done week 1, we've done week 2. And, Joe, week 3, probably the worst slate of the season here. There's one game that is a single-digit spread. So that means there should be a lot of wins for teams in the Big Ten. We do have 2 games on Friday night. Indiana State is going to Bloomington to play Indiana. Don't expect that one to be close. But the main story here is a throwback to Pac-12 after dark. New Mexico going to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA 10 o'clock on BTN on Friday night. Joe, UCLA needs to win this game pretty bad.
And I don't know if they do it, Sean, to be honest with you. New Mexico gave Michigan probably a pretty good game. I think their offensive game plans with the Idaho transfer QB have been pretty stellar. I'm not going to lie to you. For a team that really needs to win their first game, this is not the situation in which I would want them to do it. I know they're 15.5 to 16.5 point favorites, depending on your book, but I I really think this is a game where UCLA has to pull away when possible because New Mexico, they're a frisky team. They hang around. They're very well coached, and they don't miss tons of tackles. Michigan had to do a lot of explosive plays and sustain drives in that game. They didn't really get a lot of easy stuff. So definitely not going to be the easiest win for the Bruins. Yet I do still expect them to win. So hoping they finally get their first win after I jinxed them against Utah, where they lost by 33.
Yep, they need it badly, and New Mexico's 1-1. They're 0-2. A lot of bad stories coming out of that program right now. Just how things are run. A lot of superlatives are being thrown out, but at least they can stop that this week. You're 15.5 point favorites. Start off strong and you win the game. If they don't, I'm not sure their fans are all going to be there in numbers, but the ones who are there are going to be nervous if they're losing. And that's when the home crowd can go against you, and we've seen that story play out so many times before. We'll see if it happens Friday night at the Rose Bowl. All right, let's turn the page to Saturday, Joe. We've got big noon kickoff in the Big Ten this week, and they're going to Chicago, Oregon, going on the road to play Northwestern in Evanston. Northwestern's 1-1. They won last week after losing to Tulane in week 1, and Oregon has just scored probably been the most explosive offense of just about anybody in the country. They're up to 4 in the rankings, and they are nearly 30-point road favorites. Joe, obviously the slate is not great this week. Big Noon had to go somewhere, and this is where they chose.
Yeah, it's going to be at the Northwestern Medicine Field at Martin Stadium, aka kind of like a high school stadium. Friday Night Lights. For those who grew up in me and Sean's day, and sure, certainly there have been reruns. That's about the only highlight of this game. I don't really see Northwestern of old coming back and upsetting them. I think Coach Braun's done a decent enough job over his last 2 years, particularly in 2023. But I don't think there's anything aside from Preston Stone turning into Superman that's going to keep them from winning or even being competitive through four quarters of this game. I expect Oregon not maybe to roll to the extent they did last week, scoring like nearly 70 points, but I do expect probably a comfortable like 24 to 28 point victory, kind of as the spread indicates. And Oregon, let's face it, Sean, this week stinks, and a lot of this week's probably an appetizer to weeks 4 and 5, where there's a lot of good matchups. So I think Oregon's probably just going to want to continue to build Dante Moore's confidence and get the first conference win under their belt and under his belt.
Yeah, the weather's going to be pretty solid, so I don't expect Oregon's offense to be slowed down at all. Really, just the thing to look out for is how many points are they going to score. Northwestern's not some elite defense, but they're probably better than Oklahoma State's defense. So if you can continue to score, 40s, 50s against these, real defenses, these aren't group of 5 teams, that's going to be a confidence booster. And Dan Lanning doesn't seem too interested in, like, I don't want to say sportsmanship, but he will run up the score. Like,
Oh yeah, he will.
in this day and age, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, keeps trying to score. If you don't want the other team to score, don't let them score. But they have done that in the past, and I think 50. If they could get the over by themselves here, if the wind stays down in Chicago, and Dante Moore is able to throw it. All right, 12 o'clock. Also, we're gonna flip over to ABC. 2-0 Wisconsin is going down to Bryant Denny Stadium to play Kalen DeBoer and Alabama. This is a return game from last year when Bama went up to Wisconsin and um, destroyed them. Wisconsin lost their quarterback for the season in that game. Joe, Alabama 20.5 point favorites, still with that bad taste in their mouth from Florida State, uh, beating them heavily in week one. This is a really, really tough spot for the Badgers.
Yeah, it looks like Billy Edwards was shooting this on Wednesday evening. I don't think he's very likely to play. He's been listed as doubtful throughout the week. I think if you're Wisconsin, you kind of hope to get him back prior to the real meat of your Big Ten schedule. Because Sean, let's face it, this team isn't going to be competing for anything too major, and hopefully that doesn't get clipped because then I'd be massively wrong. So if you're a Wisconsin fan, you want me to be wrong, but you probably want him ready for your matchup in 10 days against Maryland, aka the Billy Edwards Bowl. And then somehow, if you win that, you got 2 weeks before Michigan. So, well, not somehow they'll win that. Anyway, back to this game, Sean. Ty Simpson's looked decent enough, even the loss of Florida State. I think Jeremy Bernard, Rylan Williams, I think the combo of those two is going to be too much for the Badger defense. Do they cover? That's probably more the story of the game, especially if Bryant Denny. I'll put it to you this way. I would be shell shocked if Wisconsin kept this very competitive. I just think I think that the Alabama offense, along with Wisconsin and Danny O'Neill's kind of limitations on offense, really is gonna be too much to overcome, particularly even in the first half, let alone an entire four-quarter game.
Hey, I don't really think this game has a whole lot to do with Wisconsin. I think we know what they are. It really stinks for them that Edwards is down because he is a good player, and he has produced on bad teams in the past at Maryland. But for me, we do top 25s, we do playoff projections. This is how bad is Alabama? Are they in that 18 to 25 range? And if they are, they'll win this game by 21. But if they don't, they're not a top 25 team. I don't have them in the top 25 right now. They probably won't be even if they win this game by 40, but I don't think we're going to learn a whole lot about Wisconsin here. We expect them to get beat by a lot. And if they lose 35-3, it's not surprising, unfortunately, for them. But Alabama needs it. I think they're in a spot where they might try and run up the score, too, to build some confidence with their fans. So, Wisconsin, watch out, because tough spot for this game. And unfortunately, this series was probably agreed to years ago, and probably by the one who's sitting on the game day set and is no longer the coach of Alabama. But tough spot for Wisconsin here. All right, Joe, we've got a Central Michigan versus Michigan battle at
The Stallions Bowl.
the Connor Stallions Bowl. The Chippewas heading, I guess, east to Ann Arbor to play the Wolverines. 4 touchdown favorites for Michigan. Bad offensive performance outside of one play last week in Norman. This is about getting some confidence back and scoring some points for the Wolverines.
1,000%, Sean. There's a rumor that Rod Moore is going to make his long-awaited return, his first actual game since the 2024 national title game. I don't know if that's true. I'm kind of in a see it to believe it state with Rod Moore. Central Michigan, just some fun facts about them. Their head coach is a former Army offensive line coach. They run a 3 QB system, kind of fascinating. You've heard of the 2, you've definitely heard of the 1. 3 is not something very heavily used in modern football. I think the story of this game is Michigan going to play some of these guys who got banged up? Gio El Hadi on the offensive line, Zeke Berry in the secondary, and hopefully this is a game Michigan can pack it in by halftime because I think their judgment day is coming relatively early next week in Lincoln. So for Michigan, stay healthy this game, try to get Bryce some more confidence, and obviously the overwhelming storyline is the Stallions Bowl because Sharon Moore is suspended since he did delete texts stemming from that investigation, even though they were recovered. I digress. Uh, Biff Poggi, who was formerly Jim Harbaugh's right-hand man, his associate head coach from 21 to 22, then was the Charlotte head coach from 23 to 24. He will be wearing sleeves, unfortunately. If you look this guy up, look up Biff Poggi. It's spelled how it sounds.
Yeah,
Look him up
football guy.
sleeveless. He's a true football guy. Maybe is not head coach material necessarily, but he better be these next two games for the Wolverines. So Biff Poggi and his sleeves are the only real storyline outside of the boring is Michigan gonna cover storylines.
Yep, I'd say if you show up ready, I know it's noon on BTN. There's been tons of spots here where these big teams have sleptwalked to a 10-7 halftime lead and then ended up winning 31-10. Get your starters out of the game by the end of the third quarter. That's what the goal should be, and start preparing for your first Big Ten game. Michigan desperately needs a 38-13 win here too. All right, also on FS1, we've got Houston Christian going to Memorial Stadium to play Nebraska. Don't think we need to go over that one. Towson going to Maryland, 12 o'clock on Peacock. The Big Ten's got the 12 o'clock slate covered. Towson from the FC, or they may be FBS this year for the first time, but let's hope Maryland gets to 3-0. And we've got the
Oh, they are. My bad, Sean. Sorry.
Maybe they are next year.
Yeah.
They're not FBS. So hopefully Maryland wins there. We've got Villanova at Penn State, 3:30 on FS1.
That's an atrocious game.
FCS Villanova. I mean, no disrespect to them. The reason why we haven't talked about Penn State much is because this is the opponent that they've had Florida International, Nevada, and Villanova. I mean, come on.
Those would be great basketball games, I would say.
It would. Well, one good basketball game.
Yeah.
But not much to report from there. If we have to talk about them, like we said, tough luck for those teams. All right, 3:30 on CBS. The CBS crew's going up to West Lafayette. USC coming from California to play Barry Odom and the Boilermakers. USC come in as 20-point road favorites. They've been impressive. Joe Lincoln Riley's offense looks sharp. They've scored a ton of points, and Purdue is looking to continue their undefeated season. So 59.5 line. They're expecting a lot of points here in Indiana. What do you got?
Yeah, I think is this going to be another game Jade Maeva can kind of build this momentum, and obviously USC is going to have a test in Michigan State. I think slightly less of a test. They go to a top 10 team in Illinois in 2 weeks, so this is probably about continuing to build up the confidence. A fun fact for you, Shad: USC hasn't. I believe they haven't won on the east of Chicago yet as a Big Ten conference member, which is shocking. And perhaps this could be their golden opportunity too. I think Ryan Brown's been good enough. I think Devin McAfee's definitely Purdue's best player. I don't think they quite have the horses to hang in there with USC. USC, I'm gonna spoil some things in the future. I think they're low key a playoff contender. I know they haven't played anyone yet. I think talent wise, coaching wise, I really don't know why the entire nation is still down on them. Last year, it makes total sense how you could be disappointed with that. But I think they've kind of retooled this offseason. They're recruiting very well. I just feel that there's not enough attention on the momentum USC as a program's having. So I do think they win this game. I think Jade Maeva continues to roll. I think Wayman Jordan probably gets a lot of carries and probably continues to stack 100-yard games. And I think the Trojans probably win a game, probably stemming 34-14, barely not covering the spread.
Yeah, Purdue has beaten two cupcakes. They did take some time to shake both of them. But yeah, Purdue, I think there's a couple Big Ten teams that they're better than so far. USC is not one of them. The Trojans are pretty close to the top 25. They received quite a few votes in the AP poll. They're pretty close to being ranked for me too. I think this is they keep taking a step up. All right, are you still going to be able to score 38, 40 points against a real defense? And if you can, I think USC is really dangerous. They sort of a bigger conversation here, Joe, but they really should be from a football point of view, definitely benefiting from this move to the Big Ten. They control a lot of that Western Seaboard in terms of football, especially with Arizona not being great. Arizona State's in the Big 12. You have UCLA, their problems, and then you got to go up to Oregon really to get your next powerhouse. So USC might be a long-term, buy in terms of their program. They seem to be trending up in the right direction, and that all changes though if they lose here.
Oh yeah, this is a program rooter, and for Purdue, it could be a program starter. And I'd bet on Barry Odom as an early coach of the year if they somehow won this game.
Yeah, USC, we'll see probably week 4 or 5 is when our next power rankings will come up. And USC is probably going to be moving up from where we originally had them. All right, Norfolk State goes to Rutgers at 3:30 on the Big Ten Network. Rutgers looking to go to 3-0. Hopefully they should. Also at the same time, also on BTN. Don't know how that works. Probably a location thing. Youngstown State heads to Spartan Stadium to play Michigan State. Again, not much to report from there. Get your starters out by the end of the third quarter. And then we have the Ohio Bowl, Joe, at 7 o'clock on Peacock. Ohio, hung with Rutgers, beat West Virginia. They head to the shoe as 30.5-point underdogs. Ohio State's last real test. Obviously, they've already had one, but their last tune-up game before real games come back on the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I want to spotlight Ohio here. They upset West Virginia and they won the MAC last year. Like I said, the worst MAC team. I mean, sorry, the worst Big Ten teams very likely lose to the best MAC teams or are in a four-quarter slugfest with them. That's about all I'm going to say about Ohio. This is really about Julian Sain continuing to build confidence. I think developing as a quarterback. I know they beat Texas. I think he's still got ways to go, and that's not to criticize him. I just think between him and Donaldson, I think the so much of this offense, aside from the receivers, are new, especially new to starting. Max Clare is technically a new Buckeye, but it's been in the league a while. I think this is just about building more comfortability. I think if we're talking about this game, not even in terms of close, it'll be in terms of injuries. So let's hope none of that stuff happens in this game. So Ohio State, I don't know if they cover because Ohio's a very solid team, but I bet this game's over by the start of the third quarter.
Ohio's not a team that's going to quit even if they're down by 21 at halftime. So I could see this score being like way closer than it should, especially if Ohio State pulls their starters. They end up winning by 28 instead of 45 like they should. But hopefully that's not one that we have to talk about either. Western Michigan go on the road to Illinois. 4 touchdown favorites there for the Fighting Illini. UMass goes on the road to Iowa. Iowa 35.5-point favorites. How about that, Joe? They need a win after losing their rivalry game, and they should get it. UMass is definitely a team that they should be beating by 25. And then the closest spread of the slate, it's PJ Fleck in Minnesota going on the road to Cal, 10:30 p.m. on ESPN. This is an interesting game, Joe, that not really sure how this one came about being scheduled, but it's a good chance for Minnesota to pick up a road win against a Power 4 opponent.
Yeah, this is Drake Lindsey's first, I'll call it true start as a Gopher where you're facing a real team. I know everything's going to be kind of contingent on Darius Taylor playing or not. This is just kind of a fascinating game in terms of conference warfare. We had the top of our conference in the Big Ten, Ohio State, take down Texas week 1. You kind of had fringe top teams in Michigan and Oklahoma. I think that's fair to say for both of them as of now. Uh, Oklahoma came up on top there. So maybe this is just another like kind of the middle class of both conferences going at it. I don't think we've seen quite a lot of Big Ten ACC matchups except Illinois and Duke last week, and clearly I think Illinois is closer to the top of the Big Ten than Duke's considered in the ACC. With that said, Sean, I don't know why Minnesota's favored. Big Ten teams, as we've talked about, traditional Big Ten teams don't do great out west. I'm not going to discount PJ Fleck or Minnesota as a team. I just don't like the 10:30 Eastern kickoff. I don't like when traditional Big Ten teams go out west because it rarely. I mean, let's just face it, Sean. Even last year, how often were we talking about trips out west going well for Big Ten teams? It was very far and few between.
Especially if those teams were competent And even if they, I mean, Washington was an all right team. Nobody won there.
Yep.
Oregon was awesome. UCLA stunk, but they won. They at least competed more than we thought. And then USC was USC. So I guess maybe it's San Fran, Berkeley area is not too far from LA. I don't know if Minnesota has to go to LA this year, but maybe it's prepped for that. But yeah, we have not seen Big Ten teams put their best foot forward in these types of matchups.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick Cal to pull, I guess, the Vegas upset. I don't think it's gonna be too shocking to many college football watchers around the nation. And frankly, I don't know how many are gonna have eyes on this with the other slate of games this weekend. The fact that it's probably gonna end around 1:30 or 2 a.m. But Sean, I'm gonna be honest with our viewers and listeners here, especially some maybe not on the YouTube platform. This weekend stinks. This is probably the most boring cast we'll do all year because starting next week, we're going to have games with very real consequences very quickly. We might be putting certain administrations in question. Michigan, if they lose to Nebraska, Illinois and Indiana do play next week. That should be game day, even though it's not going to be. They'll go to some lame SEC game instead or some other weird
Probably
school.
Florida, Miami, maybe.
Yeah, they'll find a way to not go there. But
Big Noon
we,
is going to
yeah,
Utah. Texas Tech at Utah in week 4. Auburn goes to Norman. That could be it. But yeah, Tulane goes to Ole Miss. They're not going to go to a Big Ten game. There's just no
no,
way. They already did it. They already did once this year, and that's probably enough for ESPN. Now, in terms of the TV deal, Big 12, Big 10, Mountain West, all on Fox. But if you remember that other part of games in the Big 10, those were sold to Peacock a couple years ago in both football and basketball. The other part of the Big 12 still gets some on ESPN. So that's just a politics behind the scenes. We keep talking about Big 12 being a Fox conference. It is primarily, but they do, Colorado, Houston's on ESPN this week. So that's something to look out for also when you're thinking, oh, will this be game day? Will this be Big Noon? Will this be 7:30 kick? All that is more about politics, unfortunately, than the actual best games. So, yeah, bad slate. We'll be here to recap it next week, but
yeah.
tune in for our week 4 preview because it'll be a whole lot better than this. All right.